When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This content may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion advised.
He had his hands behind his back, and in one hand was a metal object. I took it to be a knife.
I knew it was stupid coming here, but at that point, my blood truly ran cold, and I was done making excuses in my head.
When his true self came out, I felt like someone died.
From Killer Podcasts, true tales of horror, bizarre happenings, unexplainable events. This is Disturbed. Hello, and welcome back to the show. This week, we're bringing you 5 stories that will terrorize you. So sit back, listen closely, and dive into the horror. First, a story narrated by Dallas Stark from Reddit user Bees and Powder. Never accept job offers from Craigslist.
So I'm 19 years old and living in the Pacific Northwest. A couple months ago, I was looking for extra work because my hours at my regular job were shit. I'm quiet, anxious, and don't have any friends, so I turned to Craigslist. I knew the site could be sketchy, but I was desperate for side gigs. One ad caught my attention. It offered $50 for someone to take photos of a property using either a camera or something above an iPhone 12. I have a 14, so looking good. The ad promised the task would only take an hour or 2, so I emailed the poster and soon got a text back. The man said I seemed like the perfect fit and invited me over that same day. Feeling apprehensive, I made a post on social media asking if it was a dumb idea, and everyone told me to take a person with me. I disregarded their advice and deleted the post shortly after, but did bring a small switchblade for self-defense, just in case. It was a gift from my paranoid mom, who would have never let me go to this house if she had known. The house was about 20 minutes outside of town, surrounded by dense forest. It was small and run down, but nothing raised alarms. The man who greeted me looked like he was in his 50s and was unremarkable. He invited me inside. The house was completely empty. No furniture, just dust and dirt. I asked where to start taking photos, but he dodged the question, making small talk and asking personal questions about me instead. My anxiety was building, so I kept the small talk going, but then he began staring at me intensely. I dropped my phone at one point when we finally started taking photos throughout the house, and when he picked it up, he held on to it a little too long before giving it back. Unprompted, when taking photos of the master bedroom, he brushed my face with his hand and complimented my skin. I knew it was stupid coming here, but at that point, my blood truly ran cold, and I was done making excuses in my head. I made a quick excuse to leave, saying something about my mom, but when I turned toward the door, he grabbed my arm. I still have the picture I took after the ordeal of the bruises on my forearm. It felt like he was gonna snap it in half. Without thinking, I pulled out my knife and stabbed him in the arm. He let go, pulled the knife out of his arm, and started swinging it at me, but I was already racing out of the house. I got into my car and drove until I reached a gas station. My heart rate had calmed down a bit. I called the police and explained everything. Thankfully, they took it very seriously. I came into the station to file a report and answer questions, and they searched the property and the surrounding forest, but didn't find the man. The house turned out to be abandoned, and in the basement, they found a pack of zip ties. A report was made, but as of now, he's still out there. I call sometimes for updates, but there's never anything of substance. I've never told anyone about this other than the police, not even my mom. This is the only time anything like this has ever happened to me, and I now have trouble leaving my house most days. The whole thing plagues my thoughts constantly.
Our next story is told by Terra Ashe about being followed through the streets after picking up some Florida snow.
This happened quite a few years ago, back when I had an affinity for a particular white substance in the form of lines. One very cold, snowy night, around 11 p.m., I went for a walk to meet my dealer. I had never been to his place before, and he gave me the address to a small 2-story apartment building with about 6 units in it. Upon arrival, I noticed several strangers inside. After they'd hit their pipes, 2 clearly unwashed guys came over to sit at the dining table with me while I waited for my G. I was instantly uncomfortable. I've never smoked anything besides weed and cigarettes. The guys tried making small talk with me, but I grew increasingly uneasy and gave only short, vague answers. I quickly paid for my stuff, grabbed my baggie, and got up from the table. That's when one of the guys offered to walk me home. My heart started to sink. I politely declined. "Oh, I'm okay, thanks. I don't live far." The other guy stood up. "No, really, we can walk you. We don't mind. We have to get going anyway." That's when my instincts finally kicked in. I became very aware and very scared. I immediately thought, I'm fully dressed and ready to go, but they still have to put on their coats and shoes. If I leave now, I'll get a head start and quickly disappear. They said something else as I headed for the door, but I pretended to take a phone call, waved goodbye to my dealer, and closed the door behind me. I jogged down the hallway to the outside door, and once I got outside, I ran for the street. I decided not to take the fast route home because they'd be able to see me from the building. I didn't want them knowing even the slightest direction I lived in if they were really going to follow me. The building was at the end of the street, so instead of going straight up the hill the way I initially came from, I turned right and started jogging. I kept glancing back, and finally I saw them, about a block behind, following me. The street I needed, Stanley Street, was across the intersection on my left, about another block ahead at a 4-way light. As I approached the intersection, I noticed the corner house on my right. There was an older man sitting on his porch smoking. I recognized him. He was another dealer I'd met only once a few weeks prior when my usual guy was dry. I made a beeline for his porch and asked if he remembered me, barely choking out the words. He did and asked, "What's wrong?" I quietly told him I think these two guys are following me and asked if I could go inside for a minute until they passed. He didn't hesitate. He went inside past his front living room and into the kitchen where I explained what happened. He told me not to worry, that I was safe there and I could stay as long as I needed to. Then we heard a knock at the door and I started to panic. He went to the door, looked through the peephole and yelled, "Just a minute." He came back quickly and whispered that he knew the guys and was going to invite them in to have a hit. He told me to sneak out through the back door, which was beyond the kitchen, go to the right of the yard and find the gate. This would lead to a side street. He instructed me to creep along the side of his house, close to the shrubs, and check the porch to make sure they went inside. I followed his plan, and when the coast was clear, I sprinted up Stanley Street and zigzagged all the way home. Thinking back on it now, I'm in disbelief at my actions and how foolish I was. I thought I was invincible. I was far too trusting. But I truly thank God for the man who helped me that night. I don't know what those two guys wanted from me, but I'm forever grateful I never had to find out.
You're listening to Disturbed. We'll be right back.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like wind in your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes.
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz, spritz.
Spritz, spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
Hey, guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
Welcome back to the podcast. This next story comes from Reddit user Height Acrobatic 1066 and is narrated by Dan DeGrow. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, but I don't want you to be my neighbor.
In about 2006, when my brother and I were around 12 years old, we were at my dad and stepmom's house one afternoon, around 3 p.m., so still broad daylight. My brother and I were the only two people home because my dad, stepmom, and younger siblings were in a nearby town for their youth soccer game. The two of us were lounging in a room located at the back of the house watching a movie when we heard a knock on the front door. My brother and I grew up with our single mom and were latchkey kids. Being home alone at mom's house and having people stop by wasn't concerning or weird for us. Back in those days, it was more common for friends to drop by our house to see if you were home, since not every kid had a cell phone to get in touch. But on this day, we were at my dad's house, like I said, and didn't know anyone in the neighborhood, so the knock at the door was weird, since none of our friends or relatives lived nearby enough to come over randomly. Both of us wanted to ignore the knocking and wait for the person to go away, but my instinct was to go make sure the door was locked. We sure as hell knew better than to go and make our presence known, and damn sure weren't gonna open the door, but in my mind, there was no getting around one of us making sure nothing was unlocked. I knew my brother and could tell that he wasn't gonna do it, so I volunteered because it was an overwhelming priority. I got up and stealthily crept down the hallway leading to the front door. There was a window next to the door, so I crouched and twisted the door lock as silently as I could. It was unlocked, so I'm so damn glad I went to check. When I very carefully peeked out the window, I saw a balding, middle-aged man, slim and tall. He had his hands behind his back, and in one hand was a metal object. I took it to be a knife, but to this day, I can't say for sure what he was holding. He did not see me looking at him through the window, or if he did, he didn't let me know he saw me. The way the house was designed, the front door wasn't visible from the street because there were bushes and tall trees blocking it. My 12-year-old heart sank, knowing this random guy was at the door with what I thought was a knife behind his back, or at the very least, a metal object that he felt was necessary to put behind his back. It was especially terrifying because I recognized the man would not be visible from the street, and therefore could hide something behind his back without worrying about neighbors or cars passing by and seeing him. This house would be a good target for someone looking to do bad stuff, since they'd be shielded from view. At this point, normal paranoia became full-on fight-or-flight panic mode. It was like a switch was flipped from, let me just go make sure the door is locked, to, holy shit, I think there's a guy with a knife at the door. I crept back to the back room and told my brother what I'd seen. He grabbed the house phone and before long was speaking with my dad on the phone. My dad immediately instructed us to let his Rhodesian Ridgeback Buddy in from the backyard. Let me tell you, in a situation of pure terror, having a big loud dog was the only bit of hope or relief we had. Without Buddy there, I don't even want to imagine sitting in that feeling of terror without any hope of security. From there, my brother and I locked ourselves in a bathroom by the front door. I'm not sure why we decided to hide in the closest room to the guy outside. From inside the bathroom, we called 911 while my brother clutched a kitchen knife, both of us ugly crying and struggling to get words out to the operator. While in the bathroom, I swear on my life, I heard the front door handle being twisted around, meaning the guy was now trying to enter the house. I have such a vivid memory of huddling in that bathroom, feeling truly helpless and out of control of what might happen next, with the only comfort being the noise of Buddy barking at the front door. If the guy managed to kick the door down, he'd have to deal with a big dog, then have a knife fight with 2 kids. Needless to say, I was really hoping Buddy would hold it down for us, because I didn't like our odds if the man at the door got past Buddy. Before long, the cops arrived, and shortly after, my dad and stepmom got home too. Apparently, right after we called, they jumped in her maroon minivan and drove like 100 miles per hour to make the 15-mile drive back home. The guy was gone by then, and nothing ever came of it. To this day, my dad's theory is that the guy at the door was his neighbor coming over to complain, because apparently Buddy would always bark at the neighbor while he was doing yard work. So my dad thinks the neighbor was trimming bushes and therefore just happened to have clippers or something in his hands when he came over to complain. Sounds reasonable enough, but I wish I'd asked at the time to see the neighbor, because then I could for sure identify him and know what the situation was. Personally, I'm open to my dad's theory, but it always seemed to me that my dad clung to it more for his own comfort, since the alternative would be a parent's nightmare. If it were the neighbor though, some things don't make sense, like the guy conveniently showing up when no cars were in my dad's driveway. Seems like coming over when it appeared nobody was home would be a weird time to expect your neighbor to answer the door. Or the guy trying to twist the handle like I'm pretty damn sure I heard. Not a very neighborly act, trying to enter someone else's home when they're gone. Either way, whether the threat was real or imagined by my brother and I, our experience was as real as it gets. What I learned is that sometimes perception really is reality, at least in your own mind. The feeling of thinking we were living a nightmare was authentic and visceral because we believed we were living a nightmare. What the explanation was, I can't say for sure, and it bothers me so much that I'll never know with certainty if we were that close to God knows what. No clue why my dad never followed up with the neighbor, but looking back, it seems pretty clear that the adults wrote it off as the product of kids' imagination.
Our next story is narrated by Catherine Restivo. I thought you were my friend, but I was sorely mistaken.
This happened over 10 years ago, but I still think about how close I came to dying. I was already with my future husband, Dan, when I met his cousin, Sam. Sam and I had a lot in common. We'd both struggled with addiction and anorexia. It was great conversing with someone who'd shared similar experiences and could understand what I'd been through. We started talking on the phone, and once we even met up to have dinner and go to a movie. But he kissed me in his car, so I decided it was best that we stop talking. I told Dan about the kiss, and he was understanding. I didn't tell him that his cousin got extremely upset over me turning him down. Some time passed, and eventually Sam and I started meeting up as friends. Since we were both starving ourselves, we always went to the same place. But after a couple of times, I felt like it wasn't healthy for either of us to meet up anymore. He asked me to hang out one last time, and I stupidly said yes. He picked me up, and we went to our regular spot. During dinner, he started talking about his apartment and his job, which led him to telling me how happy he could make me. I got uncomfortable and asked him to drive me home. It was really late, and instead of driving me home, he drove me to the forest preserve. It was pitch black there, and I immediately felt uneasy. We were alone in the parking lot, and I had a horrible feeling that something was going to happen. He parked and turned off his car, then looked at me and said we were meant for each other. I didn't want to upset him, so I just said that he knew that I was engaged and that we were just friends. He had a history of violence, so I was terrified. He started getting really upset, almost crying. He said that he loved me. Then he put his arm around my neck and squeezed really hard on the right side of my neck. I was looking straight ahead, his arm wrapped tightly around my neck, when suddenly, I woke up to a police officer at Sam's window. The officer was asking if I was okay. I was really scared and confused. I had some vomit on my shirt, and I'd wet my pants. Sam had pressed down on my carotid artery long enough that it knocked me out. He was a wrestler in high school. Sam was telling the police officer we were fine and that I was drunk. He got a ticket, but I was too afraid to say anything because I thought if Sam was arrested that Dan's family would have blamed me. I now know this wasn't true. They would never have blamed me. I said I was fine, but that I wanted to go home now. I thought if I said it in front of the officer, Sam would drive me home because the cop took our names and he wouldn't risk trying something else. Thankfully, he drove me home and didn't say anything more. I don't know if Sam was trying to kill me or if he just got so upset that he went way overboard. Regardless, he almost did kill me, and it really fucked me up. A person doesn't vomit and wet themselves after a neck compression unless they almost died. I told Dan, but not right away, because I felt like it was partly my fault for meeting up with Sam. Dan was extremely angry and horrified. He was upset that I didn't tell him immediately. He's amazing and very supportive of me. I know I shouldn't blame myself, but I knew beforehand that he had problems with anger and violence. I guess I assumed he'd never hurt me because he claimed to love me. I thought he was someone who was struggling but working on himself. When his true self came out, I felt like someone died. I only saw Sam a couple of more times at holidays, and then he stopped coming to family gatherings. He didn't dare speak to me after what he did. I think Sam's brother told him to stay away after Dan gave him a brief account of what happened. Thankfully, no one in the family has ever brought it up to me. Over a decade later, recounting the story is still hard for me. I just thank God that the police officer saw his car in that pitch-black parking lot. If that officer hadn't shown up, I don't know if I'd still be here.
Our final story is narrated by Bodhi Crowe from r/Let's Not Meet. Someone crashed their car into our campsite.
In 2020, I was still living with my parents back in Texas, and during the whole COVID era, we didn't have many things we could do for fun. To change things up a bit, one evening, my parents proposed that we camp out in our backyard together. I was completely up for the idea, as I loved camping. Up until dinner, we were all really set on camping outside, but then my sister spoke up and said she felt sick and didn't want to sleep outside, so we all ended up staying inside and going to sleep around 11 p.m. The spot we had planned to camp in was to the left of our house, in this weird area of our yard that lined up with the kind of T-section on the road. We had occasionally heard kids speeding through the neighborhood late at night, but never thought it would affect us other than making us lose some sleep from the noise. At around 12:30, this particular night, I woke up to the sound of a car swerving and a sickening crack. I didn't know what to think of it, and in my groggy state, just chalked it up to be another one of the loud kids driving their cars. A few minutes later, though, my parents yelled feverishly for me and my sister to come downstairs. Knowing that they rarely used that tone, I sprinted downstairs, my sister at my heels. We found our parents on the phone with police as they stood on the porch, looking at a surreal scene below. A car had plowed through our fence, into the same exact spot we had planned on camping. The man in the car turned on his light for some reason, and I finally saw the person who had absolutely demolished our fence and half of our yard with his car. He was skinny with dark hair and looked to be in his 20s. I remember my dad telling my sister and me not to say anything to him. My parents tried to gently coax information from him, calling to him from the porch. He finally acknowledged our existence after a bit and got out of his car. He started staggering in our direction, drunkenly yelling unintelligible things. Luckily, before anything could happen, the police arrived and quickly hopped out of the car. They sat him down just to speak to him since he wasn't being openly violent yet, just completely intoxicated. While one police officer was talking to the man, the other searched his car and found a loaded gun in the passenger seat. I didn't know about the gun until the next morning, when my parents told me what the police had told them after I went back to bed. If my family had gone ahead with our camping idea that night, we would have been plowed over by that car, which I later learned was going over 90 miles per hour. The loaded gun adds another layer to the danger. I'm so glad the police arrived when they did, because the guy could have shot any of us if, in his drunken stupor, he saw us as a threat. I never found any reports online about the incident, so I don't know what became of the guy or what his sentencing was, if any. I just hope he and his car never show up in our yard again.
Want more Disturbed? Check out our Patreon for member-exclusive content, early merch access, and other cool perks. I'm your host, Doug Bailey, and this has been Disturbed, a production of Killer Podcasts and part of the Evergreen Network. For more paranormal and true crime shows, visit killerpodcasts.com. Follow our social channels at Disturbed Podcast on Instagram or Disturbed_pod on Twitter. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and reviewing on your favorite listening platform. Share your own true horror story at disturbedpodcast.com. Music by Epidemic Sound and by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Our producer is Elizabeth Flood. Our sound designer and audio engineer is Nathan Corson. Executive producers Bridget Coyne and Noah Fouts. Until next time, stay safe out there.
Hello, we have this superb podcast called We Didn't Start the Fire, the only podcast started by Billy Joel.
It is the most original, fascinating, and random way to learn the story of the 20th century.
Oh, pretty darned random. And we're joined by some pretty incredible guests.
I only wrote stuff that I wanted to hear. If it turned out to be a hit, it was pure dumb luck.
With me, Katie Puckrick.
And me, Tom Fordyce.
This is We Didn't Start the Fire, the only podcast started by me, Billy Joel.